Welcome, AP Biology, to Unit 1, Topic 2, the elements of life. Arguably, the most important element to living things is carbon. All organic compounds contain carbon, and organic compounds that contain hydrogen and carbon are what we call hydrocarbons, but you can also refer to them as organic compounds. In organic chemistry, we study all of these variety of compounds that contain carbon. If you look at carbon on the periodic table, it's in column 14, and its atomic number is 6. That means carbon has 4 valence electrons. It's this valence structure that gives carbon such variety of options when it comes to bonding. It can form double bonds. It can form these structural isomers in a linear fashion. Also, rings. It can even form all these different types of groups. And so, because carbon will bond to a lot of different things and take on a lot of different shapes, it provides the best background, underlying framework for more higher or complicated organic molecules to be built from. Carbon can form single bonds, double bonds, even triple bonds. It forms in this covalent bond fashion. So it likes to bond to other nonmetals, and it takes on this sharing of electron properties. A single carbon can form up to 4 different covalent bonds, and it can form these very, very long chains. So most commonly formed with hydrogen, but it also can form with oxygen and nitrogen. The type and number of covalent bonds that carbon forms with other atoms definitely affect the length and will definitely affect the shape that the molecule takes on. Carbon chains, they form the skeletons of most organic molecules. These skeletons, they vary in length. Many of them can be straight. You can also have them branched, and they can be arranged in these rings. But some carbon skeletons, they can have double bonds. They're going to vary where that double bond or triple bond is actually located. So such variation of these skeletal structures, if you will, give rise to the diversity and the complexity of the characteristics of all living things. So in addition to that, some atoms of other elements, they can also be bonded to those skeletons. We'll talk about those functional groups in just a second. But more importantly, you should understand hydrocarbons. Yes, they're long chains of carbon, which are saturated with hydrogens. These are the core, simple structural frameworks that will make up larger, complex molecules. So if we look at the pieces of these carbon chains, the backbone, the C attached to the carbon, attached to a carbon, attached to a carbon, those are called the skeleton. And the skeletons, they can vary in length, they can vary in their branching, they can vary where the double bond is positioned, they can also vary in how their rings. You can have a ring that has, double bonds. So there's a good variety there. Many regions of cells' organic molecules are going to contain hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are a major component of petroleum. That's called like a fossil fuel because it consists of partially decomposed organisms that have died millions and millions of years ago. And even though hydrocarbons are not very prevalent in most living organisms, many of the actual cells, our cells' organic molecules, have regions that consist of only hydrocarbon. So, for example, molecules like lipids, fats, they have these long hydrocarbon tails attached to a non-hydrocarbon component. Neither petroleum nor fat dissolve in water. Both of them are definitely hydrophobic compounds, which, the great majority of their bonds are relatively nonpolar. So another characteristic of some of these hydrocarbons is that they can undergo reactions that release a relatively large amount of energy. Gasoline that fuels cars consists of hydrocarbons, and those hydrocarbon tails of fat serve as a fat storage, which is a fuel storage for even plant embryos, which we call those seeds. And then, of course, in animals as well, yolk sacs, that type of thing. So some chemical groups that affect the molecular function by being directly involved in a chemical reaction have a special name. We call those functional groups. Each functional group participates in a chemical reaction in a specific characteristic way. There are approximately 7 functional groups that you'll need to memorize for AP biology. They're hydroxyl, carbonyl, carboxyl, amino, sulfhydryl, phosphate, and methyl groups. All of these groups, with the exception of the sulfhydryl group, are also hydrophilic, and they basically increase the solubility of the organic compound in water. That last group, methyl, that's not reactive really at all, but instead it often serves as like a recognizable tag on certain biological molecules, which we'll definitely talk about more in depth when we get into cells. So please commit these to memory, perhaps their name, their chemical formula, and their structural shape. Be able to recognize their structural shape, be able to write their chemical formula, and know their names. You're going to see them so often.